Mephigog asks, what do you think of Takashi Miike, if you are familiar with his stuff? You know, I know that I've seen one Takashi Miike movie, and I can't even remember what it is. I don't even remember. Is he the guy who did Old Man? I didn't see that. I know that I wasn't particularly impressed. I was very taken with my early exposure to J-horror, which was basically Ringu and a couple of other things, but, you know, it got old fast. I mean, the first ones were really just, wow, this is great, and different and new, and then you saw that within its own cultural tradition it was just as repetitive and unimaginative as, you know, Western horror cycles. As for Miike, I don't know. I wish I knew. Moroccansky asks a Kent Coleslaw question. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it except for one man, but the tree falls on that man and kills him, does the man dying make a sound? Well, that depends on whether the man dies slowly enough to hear his own death rattle. If his act of dying makes a sound that he can hear, then yes, it does. If he dies so quickly that he makes a sound that his brain is not capable of registering before it stops functioning, then no, he doesn't make a sound. And of course then we get into the whole question of how long a sound needs to be retained in awareness and memory for it to actually have existed. So yes, this is deep, deep stuff, man. Deep, deep stuff. Cubit 100. Will you make a vid for the Davos question, or the Davos question? I missed the Davos question. I don't know what the Davos question was. I can guess what kind of a thing it was, but I missed it. I didn't even hear anybody else's versions. Sorry. Vidensodoacer, whatever. If it were up to you, how many states in the United States would there be? Isn't it funny how large the U.S. is compared to countries in Europe? You know, this question blew my mind. I don't have an answer to how many states I think there should be, but I never thought of it before. Because there really isn't any particular reason why we have to divide up the United States the way we do. It just sort of happened. You know, it was and so it is interesting to wonder what, if any, effect it would have to realign the states. You know, whether it would create more fractious groups if there were fewer groups and they were bigger. I don't know. When in doubt, my policy is always leave well enough alone, which I think is going to be what will happen in this case. So we will stick with the 50 that we've got, or possibly the 51 if one of the territories decides it wants to be a state or something. Isn't it funny how large the U.S. is? Yes, the U.S. Is like a world, is like a continent. More than any, is the U.S. the only country that has a major... Here's how stupid I am, how ignorant I am of these geographical issues. Is the U.S. the only country that has a major seaboard on both the Pacific and the Atlantic? I know that there are places where they have a little Pacific coast and a little Atlantic coast, but what am I talking about? There's Mexico and Canada. Am I a retard? I am a retard. I'm a retard. But it's certainly true that for a long, long time the United States was like a world unto itself, and it seemed to have it seemed to have a good chunk of every kind of resource that it needed. It seemed to have enough stuff to be self-sufficient in a sort of ideal, in an ideal sense, if not a real sense. But those days are past. But yeah, part of the myth of the U.S. is that it's a new world within the new world, a whole world unto itself. Yeah, the United States is huge and wonderful. You know, if I have any problems with my country, it's with the people. It's not with the land. The land is fantastic. The land is great. The Amazing Atheist asks, how is 2001: A Space Odyssey Lovecraftian? I said that the two most Lovecraftian movies were two non-Lovecraft movies, 2001: A Space Odyssey and Suddenly Last Summer. Anyway, 2001: A Space Odyssey is Lovecraftian. Well, a lot of the things that are very eccentric about Lovecraft are also eccentric about Kubrick. The clinical, almost journalistic approach to telling fictional stories, the obsession with exaggerated mask-like characters, a certain kind of artificiality to the presentation of people. But in the case of 2001, it's Lovecraft may not have actually invented this, but he's certainly the guy who more or less patented or coined the idea that horror was a branch of science fiction, that supernatural monsters and demigods were actually aliens. And many Lovecraft stories have as their background millions of years of contact of the aliens monkeying with, you know, humans, with apes. You know, there are many Lovecraft stories, don't ask me which ones, where basically one of the elder gods, the aliens, comes and establishes a cult among the primitive humans, who then keep it going until now, and basically end up you know, going to sleep somewhere and waiting for the humans to wake them. And this essentially is the story of 2001. Also, Lovecraft is famous for his lack of female characters, and so is 2001, and for sublimating sexuality into something non-sexual. In the case of Lovecraft, it's ick and tentacles and various other gruesome physical malformations. In the case of 2001, the sublimation is machinery. It's all the, you know, it's the rockets and the space stations that have sex, not the people. And then Hal is a very Lovecraftian character in that he is driven insane by knowledge. One of the essential repeated motifs in Lovecraft is that someone learns something that drives them crazy. And the best explanation for what happened with Hal is that Hal has been given the knowledge of the true mission of the voyage, and then told to keep it a secret from the people, and he's not supposed to keep secrets and all that, and it drives him crazy. But whatever the case may be, he behaves very much like a Lovecraft character, right down to the fact that he's kind of effeminate, and more than a few Lovecraft characters are kind of effeminate. And also just the general approach to dealing with the idea of godlike aliens. You know, contrast it with Spielberg, where people are constantly looking up into a brilliant blue light and smiling beatifically like they're seeing Jesus or something. Whereas in 2001, when the astronaut goes to the Stargate, he's basically reduced to a quivering jelly, and the experience is completely it's unpleasant, and it's awe-inspiring in a very horrific kind of way, and that's very Lovecraftian. And then, of course, the end, you know, where he's kept by the aliens in some sort of zoo-like recreation of a human environment is very much like the fate of certain characters in Lovecraft stories like The Whisperer and Darkness. And then, of course, the end, the basic premise that in Lovecraft, the aliens, or the elder gods, the alien monsters who we perceive as gods, are constantly promising to change people, turn them into these superior alien creatures, whatever. And essentially, that's what happens at the end of 2001. But it's a sort of a sensibility. Kubrick is a lot cleaner and more mechanical in his sort of analytical, cold, freaky look at human-alien contact than Lovecraft was, but they have a similar sensibility. And I have heard that Kubrick was a big Lovecraft fan. I haven't been able to find hard evidence for it, but I heard it somewhere, and it was fascinating that as a kid Kubrick read Lovecraft and was taken with Lovecraft. I'd really like to know what he read and what he said about it, if he did, but at the moment I don't have any facts on that. The Big Takeover. How's the panhandling going? Oh, well, that's obviously a question for the Amazing Atheist. Didn't work out too well, did it? I guess. But hey, panhandling is what we're all essentially doing, is asking the universe to give us a chance.